So yeah, so it's like 2002, and then about so in 2003 is when Rosen and JB Strawell called me up and said, "Hey, we want to have lunch." I want to say Harold Rosen. I think that's his name. But he weirdly had he was a pioneer in space technology and electric vehicles, which is odd crossover. And he'd done something called Rosen Motors, which is like sort of an electric vehicle company, and but he'd also been pioneer in geostationary satellites. Anyway, he called me up and said, "Hey, let's have lunch." So we had like lunch at like Smith and Wollensky or something in El Segundo, where SpaceX started, and so Straubel and Rosen were talking about space stuff, and then started talking about electric cars, and I said, "Oh yeah, so I was going to be working on electric car technology at Stanford," and then JB said, we should take a drive in the T0 from AC Propulsion. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, because the timing was like lithium-ion batteries was really like the critical breakthrough needed for compelling electric cars. And so I was like, okay, I'll go try out their T0. Which had specs similar to what we eventually brought to market as the Tesla Roadster. So then, so I got a ride in the T0, and then I tried to convince Al Cacconi and Tom Gage to commercialize the T0. Now the T0, and there's like lots of stuff online about it. It didn't have doors or a roof, so. Like clearly you need to add those things, or any safety systems, and it was very unreliable, because it was just like sort of a proof of concept, basically.
I heard it was basically like hand assembled. You guys really had trouble scaling it.
No, it literally didn't have doors or a roof, or any airbags, or an effective cooling system for the battery, and it was not safe. And it was very unreliable. Break down. It needed to be babied by an engineer, or you couldn't use it. So, but nonetheless, it did get like 0 to 60. I think under 4 seconds, 250-mile range.
It was enough to convince you that it was possible.
I mean, I knew it was possible because if you go from the energy density of lead acid to lithium ion, you've got about a 4x energy density improvement. So if you've got say a 60-mile range with lead acid, you're going to have about a 250-mile range with lithium ion with the same weight. But it was cool to see it in action with AC propulsion, and I tried hard to convince those guys. Like I really pestered them a lot to going to commercialize the T0, and they just did not want to do it. Weirdly, the thing they wanted to make was an electric Scion, and I'm like, you guys, nobody's gonna pay $70,000 for an electric Scion, okay? That was their idea, $70,000 for an electric Scion. I'm like, this is not gonna work, okay? You will sell like 14 of these things, and I'm like, I kid you not, I have like the email trails and these. Yeah, I mean, I think they're still around. So, in fact, but I even say, listen, even though I think this is the dumbest idea ever, I will fund 1/10 of it if you can find 9 other people. And then I think the only other person they could find who would do it was Sergey Brin. So it's like, okay, Sergey and I are the only ones willing to do this, I think. And so they didn't actually get it off the ground. and I said it's gonna fail. But at least it's something. And so then eventually I said, kind of like, listen, if you guys are not going to commercialize the T0, do you mind if I do it? And they're like, no, yeah, that'll be totally fine. Like, okay. So then it's like, okay, so I'm go do this with JV, and we'll go commercialize, create a commercial version of the T0. And then Gage and Kokoni said, well, there's some other people who also want to do it. Do you want to maybe team up with them? He said there were 2 other groups that wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, sure. Maybe this is a way that I can have my cake and eat it too, famous last word.
Never works out.
God damn, try to have your cake and eat it too, doesn't it?
This one's going to be easy.
No, I mean, well, I didn't think it would be easy, but it was like, I thought maybe I can allocate like 20 to 30 hours a week and just work on product engineering, and then other people can do the other stuff. But I don't even like doing the other stuff anyway. So that didn't work out. So then Tom Gage said, he said there were 2 teams, but I only ever met one, and that was Everhard, Topping, and Wright. But like the thing that is really bugs me about them is like they Everhard in particular, the worst guy I've ever worked with, and I want to make a note of this. He is literally the worst person I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some real douchebags. Okay, to be number 1 takes a lot. It's not easy. His version of the story is that out of the blue he pitched me on funding his electric car company, and he convinced me to do it. Totally false. Okay, I was like, I'm creating an electric car company. It's like, then Gage said, well, maybe you could team up. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that might be worth doing, and so the company ended up being basically 5 people. This is Wright, Topping, Everhard, Strabel, and myself, and so it was the 5 of us. And Topping always tries to write right out of the history books, because they had a huge battle and they made me choose which one was going to be CEO. It's Wright or Everhard, and I talked to JV and I was like, which one? Because I really did not want to be CEO. So they're like, okay, well, both have issues, but maybe Wright has bigger issues than Topping. That's what JV said. So maybe, lesser of evils. I was like, okay, fine. I got to make a choice here, because the 2 of them they refused to be in the same building. So it was like a lot of drama. Tesla has so much drama. And I was like, okay, it's not like I said, like, lesser of 2 evils. So it's like I said, right, sorry, not that I didn't think he had good points, but if I got to pick one, I was trying not to be CEO. I got to make this rocket company work. So anyway, so then made it was like right, it's like had to leave then. Anyway, so we got basically we jammed AC propulsion, powertrain, and battery pack into a Lotus Elise. With the first prototyping, like, really just jammed it in, in retrospect, this was not a good idea, because the car ended up weighing like 60% more than an Elise, or on that order, and we didn't have enough volume to put the battery pack, and we had to we invalidated all of the crash tests because the weight distribution was different. It was heavier, so none of the crash tests were valid anymore. We had to redo the airbags. The air conditioner ran off a belt fan, so we didn't have a van, so we had to have a new air conditioning system, so we had to change the HVAC system. And so basically, in the end, only about like, I think 6 or 7% of the parts ended up being in common within the lease.
Wow.
So, and we went through a lot of trouble trying to shoehorn everything in there. And I mean, it's a cute car, but it's 10% too small. It's like, and then the costs ended up being crazy. Yeah, and then yeah. And there was an audit of the costs of the production cost of the Roadster by one of the investors that joined in 2007, and then they called me up and said, hey, the numbers that Martin is telling you, that everyone's telling you about the Roadster are totally false.
Oh boy.
And I was like, what do you mean? Like, he said, no, we just did an audit. It's more than twice of what he's saying.
Yikes.
Yeah. It's like we would have to sell this car for $250,000 in order to not lose money. I was like, this is insane.
Wow.
So anyway, then we obviously had to fire Everhard. There was no choice about that. Yeah, and then it turned out not only had he misled me directly, he'd instructed others to also lie.
No.
Yes. When I say like somebody that's like the worst person I've ever worked with,
Yeah.
it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, but SpaceX also hadn't gotten to orbit at that time, so I was like, man. So then I asked, what is the name? Harris. Remember the guy? I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, we brought in a CEO.
It was interim.
Yeah, he ran like a manufacturing company. I mean, he seemed pretty smart. The problem that I found with Tesla was we were a startup in Silicon Valley, building a car that was really manufacturing and materials engineering. And it's really like all the talent was for, you think there was probably talent, in Detroit or Japan. But if you took any of those guys in to run Tesla, they would run it like a car company, and then it would be destroyed.
Well, I had no idea. You can take somebody who's running a
You just
giant
could not
corporation.
take someone from a massive company culture and have them do a startup, and yet you couldn't find anyone in Silicon Valley who knew enough about making cars, and so we kind of found a middle of the road one he was an expert in manufacturing. Flextronics, that's right.
Ex-CEO of Flextronics was an investor. And he agreed to just join as interim CEO, and this is 2007.
Yeah. But I mean, Tesla was a company you tried so hard not to be CEO of.
Yes. But the thing is, this is misinterpreted. If I say that, it's misinterpreted as like I somehow don't love Tesla, which I do. It's just like trying not to go insane with work.
Yeah, being CEO of a real startup is 80 hours a week. Being CEO of two is 160 hours a week, and there's only 169 hours or something of sleep of 168 hours a week. So, like, you just can't physically do it.
Yeah, I mean, the pain level is extreme. So that's Anyway, I tried quite hard not to be CEO, but had to be. No choice. That or Tesla would die. So that Everhard was fired in July 2007, and he was at the time we didn't know he'd instructed other people to lie, so we thought he was just it wasn't as bad. But once he left the building, then it turned out no, he'd actually orchestrated a massive deception, which is quite bad. So, yeah. He also said he came up with the name of Tesla Motors, which is false. That was created by a guy in '95, and moreover, he knows this because we went to great length. We had to buy the trademark.
Yeah, exactly.
So he can come up with the name. It was trademarked in '95. So it was like there's a whole bullshit backstory of it, but. The guy we almost had to change the name of the company because the guy who owned Tesla Motors wouldn't communicate with us, and so eventually we sent the nicest guy in the company. No, who's weirdly Martin's best friend, which I don't understand, but Mark Topping, super nice guy.
I like Mark a lot, actually.
Yeah, you can't not like Mark. It's impossible. He's a super nice guy. So we sent Mark to go sit on the guy's doorstep and not leave until he until he agreed to at least negotiate with us or something. He talked to us, and then we ended up buying the trademark for $75,000.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Was he the one who owned the domain too?
No, that was a whole different nightmare. But the domain guy, that took us 10 years to buy that Tesla.com domain. Man, and he is, I think, still like a networking engineer at Juniper. So, yeah, that was, and that cost us like $10 million.
Yeah, that was
crazy.
like the guy just held out.
Was he just sitting on the domain, or was he using it for something?
It was impossible to. No, he wasn't using it for anything.
Just holding the name. It's like Twitter handle Falcon Heavy isn't being used. We're fighting for that one.
Yeah, so man, took us ages to buy the Tesla.com domain. We were gonna have to change the name to be something else, and actually, the lead candidate was Faraday as the name, because Faraday invented the electric motor, and then Tesla perfected the electric motor with the AC induction motor. So it was, if we couldn't do Tesla, we would do Faraday, and then ironically, a competitor was later created called Faraday.
Faraday, yes. A startup.
Yeah.
From China, right?
Yeah. So.
Did you guys have a Faraday logo or anything? Were you that far down the
No.
track?
We didn't really even have a Tesla logo until later because there was nothing to sell or anything. So, but in the end, the Tesla logo and the Tesla font was done by me working with basically a little firm. That's why the Tesla and SpaceX. There's some similarities between the fonts, and that's because it was done by the same people. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the Tesla and SpaceX fonts. Get the little things.
That's cool.
You want to eat now?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
I think it's all in the kitchen.
All right.
Awesome.